How much does it cost to build an ADU is a question nobody likes to answer because the costs vary a lot. So instead, I'm going to give you three good ways to estimate your costs and figure out where you fall between $200 a square foot and $600 a square foot. There's a fair amount of distrust for contractors who don't want to quote you, and there are good contractors, honest contractors out there, and they should be a little reluctant to quote you over the phone because they don't want to set the wrong expectation for your project. And projects do tend to be complicated and unique. Well, that's all well and good, but you still want to know about how much is this going to cost you before you invest a bunch of time, right? And there are three easy ways to figure out what your ADU might cost. And we'll go through all three versions in this video very quickly, link to other videos where we go into more detail about the techniques, or link to blog posts in the description below. I'm going to rattle through the variables just so you understand why I don't want to come out and say every ADU costs this much, right? The building's design and finish, the building size, and those are the two that people are used to thinking about. The location of the property, the cost of labor and material, where that property is located, what's the accessibility of your lot, what is the slope of your lot, what is the soil type of your lot. If you don't want to watch a whole lot of videos, I'll boil it down and set your expectation at a large cost, right? If you're too busy and you just want one number, here's the deal. Cost per square foot is not a hugely reliable number, and we'll get into why that is later. But let's say you're building a 750 square foot ADU, detached, new construction. It's really safe to assume your costs all in are going to start at $350 a square foot. And so if you do the math, right, that's 750 square feet times $350 a square foot. That's a $262,000, $500 project. So just ballpark. If I had to set expectations without knowing anything about your project, I would go, hey, a 750 square foot ADU tends to cost over $250,000. If that number is super scary, I would do more investigating into the costs and budget before you go too far down the road of should I build an ADU or not. If you've heard of conversion ADUs, often cost much less than this. And so that is the other number I'll give you if you're too busy to watch the whole video. Some people who take an existing space in their house and convert it to an ADU, some people get away with dramatically reduced costs. But I'm going to just tell you again, you want to be real careful with this. Some people finish an internal conversion for under $60,000, 60,000. So still a large number. And some people, after they have a contractor or a professional visit that garage or attic or whatever that they're converting, will discover that the costs are significantly higher than that. And a lot of garage conversions and other types of conversions end up being as expensive as detached construction. So I don't want to give you the impression that because you're converting a part of your existing house, it's going to be real cheap. That's not always the case. But yeah, so if you don't have time to watch the whole video, that's the two big costs I'd set in your mind. And so you need to do a certain amount of work, and that fixed cost doesn't go away. So if you have a tiny ADU, those fixed costs get amortized over a much smaller square footage footprint. And so your cost per square foot goes up. Okay, now that said, there are three good quick ways to kind of look at your project from three different perspectives and kind of hone in on what the costs might be. The first way that I want to introduce to you is to look at example costs. So if you talk to a contractor and you say, what's my project going to cost? They're going to want to visit your site and really hear a lot of details. Some of them will say, well, I need plans to tell you the cost. I can't just conjure up a cost without really specific plans. They're kind of all over the spectrum. A more successful way to get information like that is to ask, what are costs of typical ADU projects? Can you give me some sample costs for a hypothetical ADU? Or what are the costs of the last 3 ADUs you did in the style that I'm doing? So if it's a detached ADU on a slope, you go, have you done detached ADUs on a problematic slope before? And they say yes or no. If they say no, you probably good time to say, well, maybe I should work with somebody who's done this before. If they say yes, you go, okay, could you, I know it's different projects, but could you give me the ballpark of what that sloped detached ADU cost? And they can maybe share that with you. And then that gives you a sense of what the costs will be. So you're asking for typical costs, or, what's average, or what are typical costs? And then you're not asking them, how much is my project going to cost? And if you talk like that, the contractor probably will understand, oh, okay, you're reasonable. You aren't asking for a price for your project. You're just trying to get a ballpark of typical costs. And in case you're shy or you don't have a contractor yet, there's a link in the description below with some sample costs provided by an East Bay contractor named BuildZig. There's a video, which I'll try to link to in the card that pops up at the top of the video here. So if you click on that, it'll go to a webinar we did where they walk through some typical costs. And they make it real clear. These are not the cost of your project. These are just some typical costs to give you an idea. And they say, okay, if we're going to build a 500 square foot ADU, here's some different options we have. And here's what the costs might come out at based on a few really important variables. And then they also try to make some assumptions about what you might make back on your investment. So interesting video to check out if you want the detailed version of that, or link in the description below. Okay, the second way I think is really helpful is there are online cost calculators specifically built for accessory dwelling units. So again, I'm going to link to a tutorial video on how to use those cost calculators. And you can go off and put in a bunch of variables, and it will calculate on the fly what your ADU costs might be. Your total costs broken down by hard costs like construction, soft costs like architecture, engineering, and your fees and your permit fees and building fees and inspection fees. And when it does that, it just gives you a sense. You can play with the variables and you can see, oh, when I increase the size, this cost goes up, but this cost per square foot goes down. And if I change from being in a septic system to not a septic system, there's a big difference. So that's very clear to me. Oh, septic makes a big difference. Sewer and septic make a big difference on these projects. So they're fun to play with. Again, you've got the video where I talk about how to do that in more detail and explain all the different fields. There's a link in the description below that walks you through some of that. And then those cost calculators tend to be built for a specific area. So if there's one for San Mateo County and there's one for Napa and Sonoma County. If you don't live in one of those 3 counties, it's okay. You use the San Mateo County one. You choose South San Francisco, and then whatever the cost is at the end, then you multiply it by a multiplier, which I also explain in the blog in the description below. And that multiplier will adjust it for a city near you, closer to you. So you can say, oh, if I'm in Oakland, it's actually more expensive than the South San Francisco costs in that cost calculator. If I'm in Sacramento, it's less expensive, and it gives you the exact multiplier to use for an average. Yeah. All right. The third way to figure it out is to look at actual average costs. Meet somebody who has built an accessory dwelling unit, find out what they spent, and say to yourself, is that, if that's real, then that's realistic. There's a lot to go into that, but it's nothing beats actuals, right? The first 2 are estimates. They're not even averages. They're kind of like typical projects. Actual averages are the best. The problem is not a lot of people are sharing actual average costs yet, which is why I have an exciting announcement that I've buried halfway through this video. Um, I'm launching a California ADU database so that people who finish their accessory dwelling units can pop in their cost information and whether it was detached or conversion and just a couple other variables. I'm going to anonymize and aggregate that data and then publish it periodically to update people on what costs are looking like in different regions of California and what the number of accessory dwelling units of different types that are being built and shared in this database. And that's really exciting. So if you are watching this, you haven't completed an ADU probably. If you're watching this, you're trying to figure out your costs still. But I hope that you can like this video and then one day you'll come back and tell me, Ryan, thanks to your free videos and a bunch of people in the industry, I have completed my accessory dwelling unit. It cost me this much, and I want to enter that information in the California ADU database to help other people who are building their ADUs. Today, you might not be ready to do that. So what I'll do is I'll ask you to share this video with people who have completed accessory dwelling units, and then I'll also link to some homeowner builder bloggers in the description below that I think are doing a great job sharing their costs on their projects. They'll teach you a lot as you read through their blogs, and it's great content. It's brutally honest because they're not trying to sell you anything. They're just sharing information, and I love it. It's really amazing. So that's the three ways I wanted to go over. One, you can ask for typical costs from a contractor. Two, you can use an ADU cost calculator. And three, you can ask other homeowners. And if you help me by sharing this video, we'll get a lot of homeowners to put in their average costs, and we'll get real data on self-reported costs from homeowners out there in the world. And between those three, you can kind of triangulate what your costs will be, and it'll give you a good ballpark. And then you'll be that much more educated when you go into the design phases and the financing phases, so that you can say, okay, well, what do I want? What can I afford? And you kind of go back and forth between those. So costs can commonly vary between $200 a square foot all the way up to $500, $600 a square foot. It really depends on the project. The other thing is big ADUs and small ADUs, they cost different amounts, right? A smaller ADU in general can cost less than a similar style ADU of a larger size. But there's certain costs that are fixed, like putting in a foundation requires a certain amount of work, whether it's a small foundation or a large foundation. Putting in a bathroom requires a certain amount of work, whether it's a small ADU or a large ADU. With other things like cars, even though there's a wide range in costs, you can kind of say, yeah, but an entry level sedan tends to cost around the same amount no matter what dealership or brand you go to. And a big, luxury SUV has a sort of bracketed cost, or a mid-class. Well, there's this notion that, yeah, there's a wide range, but I should be able to target a specific cost. And in construction, though, it's a little more complicated because everything is so unique and custom to your property. If you want more detail on the three techniques, this playlist will go into that cost in more detail and how to do those things. If you want to know how to bounce back and forth between cost, design, finance, how to start your ADU, check this video out. And if you need help at all, email me, call me, numbers right there. Look forward to helping you build an ADU, getting more housing in California.